Chapter 8. Girls, wake up. Mathilde, it's testing day. My sisters threw on their old school clothes and hurried downstairs to eat, but my fingers felt cold as I did up my buttons. I sat in front of my breakfast so long that eventually Mother sat down next to me. I picked up my spoon and ate a few mouthfuls. It's time to go, she said at last. She kissed my temple. Good luck. I went to the front hall and found my coat. Those buttons gave me trouble, too. Listen, Big. Father pulled me aside in the doorway. I hugged him, clinging like a toddler on the first day of kindercare. Finally, he managed to hold me at arm's length. He crouched down. What is it? He asked, as gently as he would have spoken to Ty. But I pressed into his chest again and mumbled, My friend May won't go. Oh, he chuckled. They'll let you go. They have to score the tests. That takes time. He patted his pockets. I drew back at last, and he stood up. He pulled 3 copper coins from his shirt pocket and gestured for me to hold out my hand, which I did, not believing it when he set the coins there. Each was worth just 1/8 of an oren, but was a treasure in our house. No matter what happens, you're worth 1,000,000 orens to me. 1,000,000 times 1,000,000. Then times all the stars in the sky. Though I don't have 1,000,000 orens, so you can have the coppers I do have. For the bakers on the way home, get yourself a treat when it's over. However it goes, I'm very proud of you for signing up. 3 coppers. I could buy a glazed bun or a tiny sweet cake all for myself. What would we go without later so I could have this treat? No, not later. Father hadn't had toast this morning, just coffee, and no bread with his soup last night. Thank you, Father. I flopped in for one more big hug. I love you. And I love you, Big. Go on now. Cammie's getting ahead of you, and you don't want to be late today. I nodded and tucked the coins inside my coat pocket. Father straightened my scarf and tugged my braids free, and then I was flying up the street after my sister. In the schoolyard, the younger children ran around like there was no food shortage and no war that their fathers weren't away and their houses not knocked down. But we older ones lingered, unusually still, whether we were taking the test or not. My heart longed to run around with the younger children, but my legs felt too wobbly. Megs and I stood together, watching our breath turn to steam in the air. That must be the examiner, Megs whispered. I looked over at the teachers. The new woman had dull blonde hair, pulled into a tight knot at the nape of her neck. She wore a gray army uniform with a jacket and skirt to her knees. Cammie ran over and tugged my sleeve. Mathilde! She squeezed my arm. Ouch! What? I asked. What's wrong? Julien says they're taking everybody today, everybody who sits the test. If you signed the papers, you belong to the army already. That isn't true, Meg said. If they are taking everybody, they wouldn't be holding a test, would they? The bell rang. Megs ran to the line for the test, not wanting to lose points for tardiness. But when I looked down at Cammie, she was crying. Hey, shh. I knelt to look at her into her eyes. Her worry was the same one I'd confessed to Father. Megs is right. They won't take people who won't be useful. I don't have much of a chance to be picked. Cammie frowned at me, doubtful. I'm nowhere near the top of my class, and most of the kids who are 2 years older than me. Miss Tamarin seems surprised I'm even going to sit the test, but anyone's allowed to. Cammie scowled, still not believing me. The yard had almost cleared. We didn't have much time. Listen, you'll get out of school hours before me today. Get a treat. I put the coins in her hand. Her mouth dropped open as she turned them over. Where did you get these? Father. Suddenly, I felt warmer, lighter. Father had said he would be proud of me no matter how I did. And if he was scrimping on bread, he wasn't expecting the 400 orens. He wasn't expecting me to pass. What a gift Father had given me in these coins. I glanced up at the teachers. The examiner was staring at me from the head of the testing line, brow creased and mouth set straight. Uh-oh. I jumped, grabbed Cammie's hand and ran over to her line, and hurried to the back of my line. The examiner asked, Mathilde Joss? Process of elimination. I was the last one. Yes. You're late. Yes. Care to explain yourself? No. She nodded and entered a mark on her attendance sheet. I swallowed hard and stared solemnly back at her. The examiner's assistant led us to a large classroom. At each of the 40 desks sat 2 booklets, a pink one with printed text and a blank blue book, plus 2 sharp pencils. The examiner had somehow gotten there ahead of us, as if she could evaporate and reappear in a different place. She said, You will sit in alphabetical order by last name, starting in the front left, one behind the other. Then she called our names, and we took our seats. Some of the older students, especially the boys, were much taller than me. I felt very small in my chair. Meg sat behind me to the right. I turned to look at her, but she was so focused that I couldn't catch her eye. She was like that during tests. I turned back around. The examiner said, Put your lunch pails on the floor. Verify that your name is on the pink booklet in front of you. Mine was. And on the answer booklet. Mine was. Many of your answers will go in the pink booklets, but for math problems and longer paragraph answers, you may use the answer booklet. You may work in any order, but make sure to number the answers you enter in the blank book. You have all day today, but not any longer. There will be a break at noon for lunch and stretching. She paused, but no one moved. No one would dare open the booklets before being instructed to. The examiner's manner changed. From being someone who looked like she would take a ruler to us for the slightest infraction to someone who might, maybe, give a crying child a hug. Maybe. Before you begin, I want to thank you for volunteering to serve your country. You are very young, and if selected, you may spend the rest of your childhoods away from home. None of you have taken the decision to be here lightly, nor have your families. Olive Soferend appreciates your willingness. She looked each of us in the eye in turn, and then she became stern again. There is to be no talking. If you need to use the washroom, raise your hand, and my assistant will escort you in silence. Otherwise, no one who leaves will be permitted to return. You may open your booklets and begin. A quick flutter of paper as 40 booklets opened at the same time. Cracks of the booklet spines being creased to lie open, taps of pencils being removed from the grooves in the desks. I glanced around the room, but when my eyes looked forward, the examiner was watching me again, so I cleared my throat and opened my own pink booklet. 50 pages crammed full of tiny typed text. I turned through the pages slowly, enough work for a day or two, even for a grown-up. It probably wasn't possible to finish the test today. We wouldn't be expected to. Phew. I settled on pages with math I knew, opened the blank blue book, and got to work. After the math, I moved on to translations. They seemed to expect us to know every language on the continent, and those from Eileen and Norland, too. I thought I understood most of the passages and scribbled out everything I could. I was surprised when the examiner announced, Please close your booklets. You may stretch, walk around this room, and eat, but you are still not permitted to talk. I stretched, got my lunch pail, and looked to Meg's. We walked over to the wall and sat together. I opened my lunch pail to find that Father hadn't been the only one who'd wanted me to have treats today. My slice of bread, packed by my mother, had a paper-thin spread of butter, and, even more unbelievable, a sprinkle of sugar. There was also a small, beautifully shined green apple. Meg's sandwich had an extra slice of spicy red sausage on it. Extra meat was even more special than my sprinkle of sugar. I pulled my sweater more tightly around my middle and leaned against Meg's. Meg sat straight and stiff. She took tiny bites, chewing carefully. Halfway through my sugared bread, I held it out to her. She shook her head. Halfway through my apple, I held that out to her, too. She shook her head again, but I continued holding out the apple. She took 2 bites and handed it back. The examiner's attendant came by and offered us each a glass of water and a trip to the washroom. The examiner, while keeping a close eye on everyone, set 2 pencils on every desk, taking the dull ones away. Where a student had worn out the erasers in the morning, she left an extra pink cube of eraser for the afternoon. Megs and I stayed together against the wall, and I squeezed her hand. She would do fine. she would be picked to go. Though, if this was how nervous she was on testing day, what about all the days that would follow, when she was serving in the war? When Megs went, she would go without me. End of chapter 8.